The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 300 meters of polished crystal and floating holographic displays that showed star maps of known space and the territories of all member species who had earned their place among the stars through achievement of faster-than-light travel, and demonstrated peaceful intent toward their neighbors in this vast universe. They all shared. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat in the human delegation seat and watched as the Kravath representative slammed his clawed fist against the speaker's podium with enough force to crack the reinforced material underneath his scales that gleamed like burnished copper under the chamber's artificial light. The humans will surrender their outer colonies to Kravath administrative control within 30 rotations, or we will be forced to provide educational correction to this primitive species who barely understands the protocols of civilized space, the Kravath commander named Vorax announced to the assembled representatives of 247 spacefaring civilizations. The other species in the chamber barely reacted to this ultimatum, because such displays were common when dealing with the younger and weaker members of the Council who lacked the military strength to defend their territorial claims against more established powers who had ruled their corners of the galaxy for thousands of years. Before humanity even discovered Fire-Chen remained perfectly still in her seat with her hands folded calmly on the desk in front of her, while her face showed no emotion whatsoever, despite the insult that had just been delivered to her entire species and all of humanity's achievements over the past 50 years since first contact had been made with the galactic community. The Vexorian observer to her left made a sound that translated roughly as sympathetic pity through the universal translator that allowed all these different species to communicate despite having evolved on worlds separated by thousands of light years with completely different atmospheric compositions and gravity levels. You should agree to their terms, the Vexorian whispered with his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, as was his species' way of showing genuine concern for another being's welfare. Your military fleet consists of barely 200 vessels, according to our intelligence networks, and most of those are converted cargo haulers with minimal weapon systems that would not survive even a minor engagement with a proper war fleet like the Kravath possess. Chun turned her head slightly to acknowledge the Vexorian's words, but still said nothing as she waited for the proper moment to respond to Vorax's ultimatum. According to Council protocols that required specific timing and procedural correctness in all official matters of territorial dispute, the Council Arbiter, an ancient being from the Zilnari collective whose species had founded the Council 3,000 years ago, raised one of its crystalline appendages to signal that the human representative could now speak if she wished to respond to the Kravath. Demanschan stood slowly and walked to the speaker's podium where Vorax still stood, radiating confidence and barely concealed contempt for the soft-skinned mammalian species that had joined the Council only 5 decades ago after finally developing a functional slipstream drive. The United Nations of Earth acknowledges the Kravath Dominion's stated territorial interests in the disputed border region, Chun said in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. However, we request the traditional 30-day deliberation period, as is our right under Council law, before providing our formal response to these demands. Lorax's eyes narrowed with amusement at this request, because everyone in the chamber knew that 30 days would change nothing about the fundamental power imbalance between the mighty Kravath military machine and humanity's pitiful excuse for a defense force. Granted, Vorax said with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. 30 days for the humans to contemplate their inevitable submission to superior force and wisdom. The session ended, and Chun returned to the human embassy compound, where she immediately entered a secure communication room that was shielded against every known form of electronic surveillance and quantum entanglement eavesdropping. Admiral Rodriguez, Chun said, as the holographic image of Earth's senior military commander materialized in front of her. with his weathered face showing the strain of maintaining humanity's greatest secret for half a century. They took the bait, Chun reported. The Krivitha issued their ultimatum exactly as strategic planning predicted they would, based on psychological profiles and historical pattern analysis. Rodriguez nodded slowly and glanced at something off-screen before returning his attention to the ambassador. The Krava scouts have been monitoring our patrol routes for 6 months now, and they have concluded that our visible fleet represents the totality of human military capability, he said. They have no idea about the shipyards in the asteroid belt, or the weapons platforms we have been constructing in the Kuiper belt, or the fact that every single human colony has underground defense systems that could withstand orbital bombardment for years. Chun allowed herself a small smile at this, because the deception had been perfect in every way. Since humanity first made contact with alien species and immediately understood that they had entered a galactic community that operated under rules very different from Earth's brutal history of survival and warfare when the first alien probe had entered the Sol system 50 years ago. Human leaders made a decision that would define the next 5 decades of human expansion into space, and that decision was simple, yet profound in its implications for the future. Never reveal humanity's true nature to the galaxy until absolutely necessary. The aliens saw humans as weak, because humans wanted them to see weakness where strength existed. They saw a small defense fleet because humans showed them only the colonial patrol vessels, while hiding the actual military construction that had been accelerating since first contact. They saw peaceful explorers because humans carefully studied galactic customs and played the role expected of a young species joining the community for the first time. What they did not see was the weapons development programs that had been running continuously since the Cold War era and had been massively expanded once humanity knew for certain that hostile alien species existed in the universe. What they did not see was that every human child learned military history as part of their basic education and understood concepts like strategic depth, combined arms warfare, and total war mobilization. What they did not see was that humanity had been preparing for interstellar conflict since the moment they looked up at the stars and wondered what else was out there in the darkness between worlds. The Kravath will attack before the 30 days expire, Rodriguez predicted. Their psychological profile indicates they value surprise attacks and overwhelming first strikes as demonstrations of military virtue. Agreed, Chun said, which means we need to begin the evacuation of the outer colonies immediately while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian activity until the last possible moment. Rodriguez began issuing orders to his staff off-screen while Chun prepared her next communication for the Council, where she would continue to play the role of the concerned diplomat from a weak species, hoping for protection from the galactic community's mercy. But in her mind, Chun was counting down the hours until the Kravath made their fatal mistake and gave humanity the justification it needed to reveal what had been hidden for 50 years in the depths of the Sol system, where the real human fleet waited in silence for the moment when pretending to be weak would no longer serve humanity's strategic interests. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were capable of based on the small patrol fleet and peaceful diplomatic missions. Soon, they would learn the truth about a species that had clawed its way up from the savannah. While fighting predators and each other for millions of years, soon, they would understand what it meant to provoke a species whose entire history was written in blood and fire and survival against impossible odds. The Kravath wanted war with what they thought was a weak and primitive species. They were about to get war with humanity, and that was something entirely different from anything the galaxy had seen in its 3,000 years of recorded history. The Krivith invasion fleet emerged from slipstream space in perfect formation above the human colony of New Hebrides on the 21st day after their ultimatum had been issued, and 9 days before the negotiation period was supposed to end. According to council law and diplomatic protocols, 200 warships materialized in orbit around the agricultural colony that was home to 50,000 human civilians who worked the vast grain fields that fed other human settlements throughout the sector and contributed to Earth's growing reputation as efficient food producers for the galactic trade networks. Vorax stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched the tactical displays showing the pathetic human defenses that consisted of exactly 3 patrol vessels and what appeared to be some civilian cargo haulers attempting to flee the system with their holds full of colonists. Broadcast our attack on all galactic channels. Vorax ordered his communications officer. Let the Council see what happens to species who refuse the reasonable demands of their superiors. The Kravitha fleet began their bombardment of the colony's orbital platforms while their smaller attack craft pursued the fleeing human ships through the outer system where escape seemed impossible against the superior speed and firepower of Kravith interceptors. Then something unexpected happened that made Vorax's tactical officer stare at his displays with confusion spreading across his scaled features. The orbital platforms that should have been destroyed by the first salvo were still operational and returning fire with weapons that burned through Kravith shields like they were made of paper instead of military-grade energy barriers that had protected Kravith ships for centuries. Defense platforms are using focused particle beams with power outputs exceeding our weapons by a factor of 3. The tactical officer reported with disbelief in his voice. That technology should not exist in human inventory based on all intelligence reports. 3 Kravith destroyers exploded in rapid succession as the human platforms demonstrated targeting accuracy that suggested advanced artificial intelligence guidance systems that the galaxy thought humans had not yet developed. Vorax snarled in frustration and ordered 20 more ships to concentrate their fire on the platforms until they were reduced to debris and expanding clouds of superheated gas. The platforms died, but they took 12 more Kravith vessels with them before their reactors overloaded and created miniature stars that briefly lit up the night side of New Hebrides below. Land the ground forces, Vorax commanded. Take the colony and secure the civilians. For processing, the Kravith assault troops descended on the main settlement, expecting minimal resistance from farmers and agricultural workers who might have small arms at best for protection against local wildlife. Instead, they encountered prepared defensive positions with interlocking fields of fire and automated weapon systems that emerged from hidden bunkers beneath what looked like ordinary storage buildings and residential complexes. The battle for New Hebrides lasted 6 hours and cost the Kravith 8,000 soldiers before they finally secured the settlement and prepared to parade their human captives before the galactic news networks, except there were no captives to be found anywhere in the entire colony. The settlement was completely empty of civilians, and every piece of equipment worth taking had been removed or destroyed beyond any hope of salvage or intelligence. Gathering, where are the humans? Vorax demanded of his ground commander, who stood in the middle of the abandoned colony's central plaza, surrounded by burning buildings and the bodies of Kravith soldiers who had paid in blood for every meter of ground. Gone, sir, the commander reported. Tunnel systems beneath the colony suggest they evacuated everyone at least 3 days ago through underground rail networks that connect to hidden spaceports in the mountains. Vorax realized with growing anger that the humans had known the attack was coming and had prepared accordingly while still maintaining the appearance of normal colony operations until the last possible moment. The other 2 colonies targeted by the Kravith fleet reported similar results, with devastating defensive fire that destroyed dozens of ships before the colonies could be taken, and completely empty settlements that yielded nothing but infrastructure too damaged to be useful. The Kravith invasion that should have been a simple demonstration of superior force against a weak opponent had cost them 73 warships destroyed and 15,000 soldiers dead, while capturing exactly 0 human prisoners and 0 intact facilities. Vorax composed his report for the Kravath High Command while his remaining fleet regrouped in orbit above the conquered but worthless colonies before he could transmit his report. Every communication system on every Kravath ship suddenly activated simultaneously with an incoming message that overrode all security protocols and filled every screen with the image of Ambassador Chun sitting calmly behind a desk with the Earth flag displayed behind her. People of the galaxy. Chun began in a voice that carried no emotion whatsoever. 17 hours ago, the Kravath Union launched an unprovoked military attack against 3 peaceful human colonies in violation of Council law and the diplomatic immunity granted during negotiation periods. The galactic news networks exploded with commentary as billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched the human ambassador speak. The Kravath killed 417 human security personnel who stayed behind to operate the automated defenses and buy time for civilian evacuation. Chun continued, "We mourn their sacrifice and honor their courage in the face of overwhelming enemy numbers." Vorax felt something cold settle in his chest as he watched the human speak with the calm certainty of someone holding a much stronger position than her species. Apparent weakness should allow. The United Nations of Earth hereby declares a state of war exists between humanity and the Kravath Dominion effective immediately. Chun announced, "We formally request that all neutral parties evacuate the following Kravath systems within 48 standard hours." A star map appeared behind Chun showing the Kravath home systems and major military installations throughout their territory. After 48 hours, humanity will begin military operations to neutralize the Kravath threat and ensure such unprovoked aggression never occurs again. Chun said, "To all council members, humanity did not seek this war, but we will finish it." The transmission ended, and Vorax stared at his screens while around him his bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Then, the laughter started spreading through the Kravath fleet as officers and crew members found the human ultimatum to be the most ridiculous thing they had heard. In their entire military careers, they think they can threaten us, one of Vorax's commanders said between laughs. Their entire visible fleet could not defeat even 1/10 of our military strength. Vorax wanted to share in the amusement, but something about the human ambassador's tone troubled him deeply. She had not spoken like someone making an empty threat or desperate bluff. She had spoken like someone delivering a weather report or reading a maintenance schedule with complete confidence in the accuracy of the information being provided. "Recall all Kravath military forces to defensive positions around our core worlds," Vorax ordered suddenly. "Send priority alerts to Home Fleet Command that humanity may possess military capabilities beyond our current intelligence estimates." His officers stopped laughing and stared at their commander with confusion. "Sir, the humans have shown us everything they possess." The tactical officer protested. "We destroyed their orbital platforms and took their colonies even if they were empty. We destroyed what they allowed us to see." Vorax corrected, "And we took what they chose to abandon." He pulled up the combat footage from the orbital platform engagement and watched again as human weapons tore through Kravath shields with power levels that should not exist. "Send the recall order now," Vorax commanded, "and prepare the fleet for immediate withdrawal to Kravath space." 47 hours later, when the human deadline expired, Vorax learned that his instincts had been correct, but his response had been far too little and much too late. Real human fleet emerged from slipstream space across 12 Kravath systems simultaneously, and there was nothing the Kravath Dominion could do to stop what came next. The Galactic Council emergency session was already in chaos when the first reports arrived of human fleet movements on a scale that should have been impossible for a species with only 200 patrol vessels in their entire inventory. Confirmed sightings of human dreadnoughts in Kravath home system. the Vexorian intelligence coordinator reported, while his 4 eyes blinked rapidly in distress. Fleet strength estimates are being revised upward continuously as more vessels continue to emerge from slipstream space. The holographic display at the center of the council chamber showed tactical data streaming in from hundreds of automated monitoring stations throughout Kravath territory, and what those stations reported defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human military capabilities. 300 capital ships had materialized above the Kravath homeworld alone, with designs that suggested years of advanced weapons development and shipbuilding on a scale that required massive industrial capacity far beyond anything humanity had shown the galactic community. Where did they hide this fleet? The Zelnari Arbiter demanded, while its crystalline form pulsed with colors indicating confusion and growing alarm. Our scout networks have mapped every human system and found only the patrol vessels and civilian infrastructure. Ambassador Chun appeared via holographic transmission from Earth, and her image stood calmly in the center of the chamber, while around her the representatives of 247 species talked over each other in dozens of languages that the translators struggled to keep sorted. The human fleet emerged from construction facilities in the Sol asteroid belt, the Kuiper belt beyond Neptune, and deep space stations positioned throughout the outer Sol system, where your scouts never looked, because you assumed humans would build ships near their habitable worlds like every other species does, Chen explained. She gestured, and the display changed to show the Sol system, with dozens of massive shipyard facilities highlighted in red throughout the outer system, where rocky debris and icy bodies provided unlimited raw materials for construction. We have been building this fleet since the day we made first contact with your probe 50 years ago, Chun continued. Every diplomatic mission, every cultural exchange, and every trade agreement has bought us time to prepare for the possibility that the galaxy might not be as peaceful as your council pretends. The display shifted again to show real-time footage of the human attack on Kravath military installations. The council members watched in horror as human ships demonstrated combat doctrines that seemed designed to inflict maximum psychological damage while systematically dismantling enemy capability to resist. Those are kinetic bombardment weapons, a Selenar representative said with revulsion in her melodic voice. They are dropping solid metal rods from orbit to destroy ground targets. Barbaric, another voice agreed. Weapons like that cause unnecessary collateral damage and violate the Council's warfare protocols. Chun turned to face the Selenar representative with eyes that showed no sympathy for galactic sensibilities about proper warfare. The Council's warfare protocols were written by species who fight over honor and territorial pride, Chun said. Humanity's protocols were written by species fighting for survival against extinction. She pulled up historical data from Earth showing thousands of years of continuous warfare between human nations, tribes, and city-states with weapons that evolved from sharpened rocks to nuclear devices capable of destroying entire cities. We did not develop warfare as a ritual or sporting competition, Chen explained. We developed it as the primary method of resolving competition for scarce resources on the world, where nature itself tried to kill us every single day. The display showed human military history from ancient Sparta to modern combined arms doctrine, with special emphasis on concepts like total war, strategic bombing, and mutually assured destruction. Your species fight until one side acknowledges defeat and withdraws according to agreed-upon rules. Chun continued. Human military doctrine is designed around the concept of destroying an enemy's ability and will to fight through any means necessary. The Council watched as human forces deployed cyber warfare attacks that crippled Kravath communication networks before physical weapons ever reached their targets. They watched as human ships used coordinated strike patterns that suggested thousands of hours of practice and simulation against theoretical enemy formations. They watched as human commanders demonstrated flexibility and initiative that came from decentralized command structures, where individual ship captains could make tactical decisions without waiting for orders from distant admirals. "This is not warfare," the Zelnari arbiter protested. "This is systematic annihilation." "Yes," Chun agreed without hesitation. "That is exactly what it is, and that is exactly what the Kravath chose when they attacked our colonies." The tactical display updated to show Kravath fleet elements attempting to regroup for a counterattack against the human vessels bombarding their military infrastructure. The human response was swift and devastating as carrier groups launched thousands of autonomous combat drones that swarmed the Kravath ships like insects, overwhelming much larger prey through sheer numbers and coordinated targeting. "Those drones are using artificial intelligence for tactical decisions," a Procyon observer noted with alarm. "AI warfare is banned under Council protocols because it removes the moral element from combat decisions." "Your protocols do not apply to humanity," Chun stated flatly. "We never signed the AI Warfare Limitation Treaty because we saw no reason to voluntarily restrict our most effective weapon systems." The human assault continued for 11 days, with Kravath losses mounting hourly as their military bases, shipyards, and defensive platforms were systematically destroyed by human forces that showed no sign of fatigue or hesitation. On the 8th day, the Kravath High Command attempted to negotiate a ceasefire through Council mediation. Chun appeared before the Council and rejected the offer without discussion. "The Kravath attacked our civilians," she said. "They killed our security personnel who stayed behind to protect the evacuation. They broadcast their assault across galactic networks as a demonstration of their superiority. Humanity does not negotiate ceasefires with enemies who have demonstrated such contempt for our people and our sovereignty." "Then, what are your terms?" the arbiter asked. "Unconditional surrender of all Kravath military forces," Chum replied. "Complete disarmament of their fleet, occupation of their homeworld by human peacekeeping forces, and war crimes trials for every officer who participated in the attack on our colonies." The council chamber erupted in protest from species who had never seen such harsh terms imposed on a defeated enemy. "You cannot occupy a council member's homeworld," the Selena representative insisted. "That violates every principle of council law and interspecies relations." Chun pulled up a new display that made every being in the chamber fall silent. It showed detailed intelligence reports on every council member species, including fleet strengths, defensive capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and projected combat effectiveness against human military forces. "We have assessed every species in this chamber," Chun said quietly. "We know your fleet compositions, your ship designs, your tactical doctrines, and your strategic weaknesses. We have run simulations of conflict scenarios against each of you and determined optimal strategies for defeating your militaries if such conflict becomes necessary." The implications of that statement settled over the council like a physical weight. "You have been preparing for war against all of us," the arbiter said. "We have been preparing to defend ourselves against any threat," Chun corrected, "including the possibility that the council itself might become hostile to human interests." She let that sink in while the representatives processed the reality of sharing the galaxy with a species that had spent 50 years secretly analyzing them as potential enemies. "The Kravath surrender will be accepted on our terms," Chun continued, "and the Council will acknowledge humanity's right to maintain whatever military forces we deem necessary for our security, or what the Selenar representative challenged, or the Council will learn that the fleet you are watching destroy the Kravath military is not the full extent of human military capability," Chun answered. "What you see is what we chose to reveal. What remains hidden in Sol System is substantially more powerful." The transmission ended, and The council sat in stunned silence while digesting the terrifying revelation that humanity had been hiding its true nature for 5 decades. They had welcomed what they thought were peaceful explorers. They had patronized what they thought were primitive newcomers. They had ignored what they thought were weak mammals barely worthy of council membership. Now they understood the truth, and that truth was more frightening than anything the galaxy had encountered in 3,000 years of recorded history. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was a species forged in constant warfare that had simply chosen to hide its true nature until provoked, and now that they had been provoked, the galaxy was seeing what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be something they were not. The Kravirith Dominion formally surrendered on the 12th day of the war, and their military commanders knelt before human occupation forces in a ceremony broadcast across every galactic network to ensure no species could claim ignorance of what happened when humanity was pushed to reveal its true strength. Ambassador Chen returned to the Galactic Council chambers 3 days after the surrender with a data archive containing information that would fundamentally reshape how every species in known space understood the nature of human civilization. Before we discuss the terms of Krevoth reconstruction and the future security arrangements for this region of space, the human delegation wishes to provide educational context for our recent military actions, Chen announced to the assembled representatives. The central holographic display activated and began showing images from Earth's history, starting with early hominids fighting predators on the African savanna with nothing but rocks and wooden spears. Humanity evolved on a death world. Chen began. Our planet subjected us to ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, and predators specifically evolved to hunt primates. The display showed massive creatures with teeth designed to tear flesh and claws built for killing. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who survived these conditions through intelligence, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to accept extinction as inevitable. Chen continued. The timeline advanced through human history, showing the development of agriculture, the rise of city-states, and the beginning of organized warfare between competing human civilizations. We did not develop warfare as a response to alien threats or territorial expansion into space, Chen explained. We developed warfare as the primary method of resolving conflicts between human groups competing for the same resources on our single world. The council members watched as human history unfolded in images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, and modern industrial warfare that killed millions of humans in conflicts over ideology, religion, and national sovereignty. The galactic community has experienced approximately 47 major conflicts in 3,000 years of recorded history, Chen stated. Earth experienced over 15,000 documented wars in the same time period. The number seemed impossible to species who fought perhaps once every century when territorial disputes or honor challenges became unavoidable. How did your species survive? The Vexorian observer asked. Surely such constant warfare should have led to extinction. It nearly did, Chen acknowledged, multiple times. The display showed mushroom clouds rising over human cities as nuclear weapons demonstrated humanity's capacity for self-destruction. We developed weapons capable of destroying our entire civilization before we even left our own planet, Chen said. We came within minutes of using them on multiple occasions. We lived for decades under the constant threat of extinction caused by our own technological advancement. The Selena representative made a sound of horror at the concept of a species so warlike that they would seriously contemplate destroying their own world. Your council protocols for warfare assume that combatants share certain fundamental values about the preservation of life and the limitation of conflict to achieve specific political goals. Chen continued. Human warfare evolved under completely different assumptions. She pulled up military texts from throughout human history, including Sun Tzu's Art of War, Clausewitz's writings on total war, and modern strategic doctrine from Earth's various military academies. We have been thinking about warfare as an art, a science, and a philosophy for our entire recorded history, Chun explained. Every human child learns basic military history as part of their education. Every human adult understands concepts like strategic depth, combined arms doctrine, and escalation dynamics. The display showed human entertainment media, including thousands of books, films, and games centered around warfare themes. Even our fiction is dominated by military scenarios, Chun noted. We have imagined alien invasions, galactic empires, and interstellar warfare for centuries before we ever met another species. When we finally encountered the galactic community, we were mentally prepared for the possibility of conflict in ways that your species simply are not. The Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with deep purple, colors indicating profound disquiet. You are describing a species with a pathological obsession with violence and destruction. It said, how can the Council trust that humanity will not turn these weapons against us? Chun met the Arbiter's gaze without flinching, because humanity also evolved the capacity for cooperation, empathy, and long-term strategic thinking that allows us to choose when and how to apply force. She replied, we are not mindless aggressors. We are a species that understands violence intimately enough to know when it serves our interests and when it does not. She pulled up historical examples of human diplomacy, peace treaties, and international cooperation that had prevented wars or ended them when all parties recognized continued fighting served no purpose. The same strategic thinking that makes us effective at warfare also makes us effective at avoiding unnecessary conflicts, Chen explained. We prefer peace because we understand the true cost of war better than species who have rarely experienced it. But when war becomes unavoidable, we prosecute it with total commitment until our objectives are achieved. The council members sat in uncomfortable silence while processing this information about the species they had patronized and dismissed as weak newcomers for the past 50 years. What are your objectives now? The Arbiter finally asked. The Kravath are defeated and their military is destroyed. What does humanity want from the Council and from the galaxy? Chun pulled up a document containing proposed changes to Council law and security protocols. First, the Kravath Dominion will be placed under human military occupation for a period of no less than 20 standard years, while their government is reformed and their military is permanently restricted to defensive forces only, she stated. Second, the Kravath will pay reparations to human colonies for damages and loss of life caused by their unprovoked attack. Third, Kravath officers who planned and executed the attack will stand trial for war crimes under human military justice. The Council members exchanged glances, but no one objected to these terms given what they had just learned about humanity's capacity for sustained warfare if opposed. Fourth, Chun continued, the Galactic Council will establish a permanent military peacekeeping force with enforcement authority to prevent aggressive warfare between member species, and humanity will provide the primary military component of this peacekeeping force. The chamber erupted in protests from dozens of species who saw this as an obvious attempt to establish human military dominance over the entire Council. You want us to accept human soldiers as the guardians of galactic peace. The Selenar representative objected. That would give you effective military control over all Council space. Yes, Chun agreed simply. That is exactly what we want and what the galaxy needs. She gestured to the display showing the wreckage of the Kravath fleet and the occupied Kravath homeworld. The current Council system failed to prevent the Kravath attack on our colonies, Chun stated. It failed because the Council has no enforcement mechanism beyond diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions. Species like the Cravath ignore such pressure because they know the Council will not use military force to stop aggression. Humanity is offering to fill that gap. The Arbiter's form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue that indicated reluctant consideration of unwelcome truths. You are asking us to live under the implicit threat of human military power, it said, to accept that humanity could, if it chose, enforce its will on any council member through superior force. We are asking you to accept the reality that already exists. Chun corrected. Humanity has superior military force, whether the council acknowledges it or not. The question is whether that force will be used as part of a legitimate peacekeeping framework with council oversight, or whether it remains as an independent threat that you must worry about constantly. She let that choice sink in while the representatives considered their options. If you reject our proposal, humanity will withdraw from the council and maintain our own security through whatever means we deem necessary, Chun said. If you accept it, we will work within council structures to maintain galactic peace and prevent the kind of aggressive warfare the Cravath attempted. Either way, humanity will never again hide our true military capability or pretend to be weak to satisfy galactic expectations. The council faced an impossible decision that was really no decision at all. They could accept human military dominance within a framework that gave them some voice in how that power was used, or they could reject it and live in fear of what an independent and unrestricted humanity might do. The vote took 3 days of continuous debate, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity became the military arm of the Galactic Council with all the authority and responsibility that role implied, and the galaxy learned to live with the knowledge that the most warlike species in known space was now responsible for keeping the peace. 6 months after the council vote that established humanity as the primary peacekeeping force for galactic civilization, Ambassador Chun stood in her private office on the human embassy station, overlooking Earth from high orbit, and reviewed reports of increasing stability throughout council space. Territorial disputes that might have escalated to warfare under the old system were now being resolved through mediation backed by the implicit threat of human military intervention. Trade routes that had been vulnerable to piracy and aggressive expansion were now secure under the protection of human patrol fleets. Species that had harbored long-standing grievances against their neighbors were finding diplomatic solutions when human peacekeepers made it clear that military solutions would not be tolerated. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, and everyone knew why. No one wanted to fight humanity and risk learning what other weapons and tactics the humans had kept hidden. Even during their devastating campaign against the Cravath Dominion, Chen's communication console activated with an incoming transmission marked with the highest security encryption protocols used only for communications with Earth's strategic Defense Command. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the screen, looking older and more tired than he had 6 months ago when the war ended. Ambassador, he greeted formally, I am transmitting this month's status report on the deep system projects. Chun accepted the data file and scanned through updates on weapons development programs, ship construction schedules, and strategic planning scenarios that the Council would never see. Construction of the Orion-class dreadnoughts is proceeding on schedule in the facilities beyond the Kuiper Belt, Rodriguez reported. We should have the first squadron operational within 18 months. Chun nodded while reading specifications for ships that would make the vessels used against the Cravath look like patrol boats in comparison. The particle beam satellite network around Seoul is now fully operational, Rodriguez continued. We can create overlapping fields of fire that would destroy any fleet attempting to approach Earth regardless of size or defensive capabilities. And the antimatter production facilities on Titan are exceeding output projections, which means we will have sufficient stockpiles for the Nova-class weapons within 2 years. Chung closed the file and looked at the Admiral with an expression that mixed pride in human achievement with concern about the implications. We showed the galaxy enough to make them fear us, she said. But what we showed them was barely 20% of our actual capability. Closer to 15% when you account for the projects that are still in development. Rodriguez corrected. The Council thinks they have seen human military power at its peak. They have no idea about the weapons platforms we are building in the outer colonies or the experimental drives that will make our ships twice as fast as anything else in known space. Chun turned to look at Earth through the window behind her desk. The blue and white sphere turned slowly in the darkness with billions of humans living their lives unaware of the arsenal being constructed in the cold depths of space to ensure their survival. Do you think we went too far? Chun asked, revealing our strength to the galaxy, making ourselves into the enforcers of galactic peace. Rodriguez considered the question for a long moment before responding. We did what was necessary, he finally said. The Kravath attacked us because they thought we were weak. If we had remained weak, others would have attacked us too. By showing strength, we prevented future wars. But we showed only enough to achieve our immediate objectives. Chun noted. We kept the most powerful weapons hidden. We maintained strategic reserves that the Council knows nothing about. As we should, Rodriguez agreed. The first rule of strategic deterrence is never reveal your full capability. Always keep something in reserve that your enemies do not know about and cannot plan against. We learned that lesson during the Cold War, and we have not forgotten it. Chun pulled up a star map showing human expansion throughout Council space with colonies spreading along the galactic arm and human peacekeeping forces deployed to dozens of systems. The other species want to believe we are their protectors, she said. They want to think of us as the guardians who keep them safe from aggressive neighbors. Let them believe it, Rodriguez replied. It serves our purposes for now. But we both know the truth. Chun nodded. Slowly, we are not guardians, she said. We are apex predators who have chosen for strategic reasons to protect the rest of the galaxy instead of dominating it through force. And we maintain that choice only as long as it serves human interests. Rodriguez did not argue with that assessment because it was accurate, and they both knew it. The human fleet patrolled Council space and enforced the peace. But every ship captain understood that their ultimate loyalty was to humanity first and the Council second. The human peacekeepers mediated disputes and prevented wars, but their real purpose was gathering intelligence on every species and updating combat scenarios in case those species ever became threats. The human presence throughout the galaxy looked like benevolent protection, but it was really a strategic occupation that gave humanity eyes and ears everywhere while keeping potential enemies separated and weak. The Council representatives are starting to trust us, Chun noted. They think we have become part of their civilization. They think we share their values about peaceful cooperation and diplomatic solutions. Good, Rodriguez said. Trust makes them predictable. Predictable enemies are easier to manage than unpredictable ones. Chun smiled slightly at the casual way Rodriguez referred to Council members as potential enemies, even while human forces protected them. What happens when they realize we still see them as threats? She asked. When they understand that we have never stopped preparing for the possibility of fighting them, they will have the same choice we gave them 6 months ago. Rodriguez answered. Accept human dominance within the Council framework or face human power outside of it. By the time they figure out the truth, it will be too late to do anything about it. We will have military superiority so overwhelming that resistance becomes impossible. Chun looked at the reports on his screen, showing weapon systems that could crack planets and ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. We built all of this in secret for 50 years, she said. We hid it from species with advanced technology and intelligence networks that should have detected our construction. How did we do it? We did it because We understood something the galaxy does not, Rodriguez replied. We understood that survival requires paranoia. The galaxy thought we were peaceful because we smiled and traded and followed their diplomatic protocols. But humans learned a long time ago that you can smile at someone while keeping a knife hidden behind your back, that you can trade with someone while planning how to defeat them if they become hostile, that you can follow rules while preparing to break them if necessary. Chun thought about human history and all the civilizations that had fallen because they trusted their neighbors and failed to prepare for betrayal. We will never make that mistake, she said. We will never trust the galaxy enough to stop preparing for war. Even if we maintain peace for 1,000 years, we will still build weapons and train soldiers and plan campaigns against every possible enemy. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. That is what makes us human, he said. We survived on Earth because we never stopped preparing for the next threat. We will survive in the galaxy for the same reason. The transmission ended and Chun sat alone in her office looking at Earth while considering the weight of responsibility that came with being humanity's voice to the stars. The galaxy had fallen silent when humanity revealed its true military power. They had fallen silent in fear and shock and dawning realization that they shared space with something far more dangerous than they had imagined. But the silence also meant acceptance, meant that the other species understood the new reality and were adapting to it, meant that for now at least humanity had achieved its strategic objectives without further bloodshed. Chun pulled up the casualty reports from the Kravath War one more time. 417 human security personnel who had stayed behind to cover the evacuation, while 1,000 Kravath soldiers killed in ground combat, over 30,000 Kravath spacers who died when their ships were destroyed. The numbers were small compared to human wars of the past, but each death represented a life ended and a family that would grieve. We did what was necessary, Chun whispered to herself, the same words Rodriguez had used, the same justification humans had given for their actions throughout history. Sometimes it was even true. She closed the reports and turned her attention to the next day's council session, where she would continue playing the role of humanity's diplomatic face. She would smile and negotiate and work within the council's frameworks, and all the while humanity would continue building weapons in the darkness between stars, would continue preparing for wars that might never come, would continue being what they had always been since the first human picked up a rock to defend against the predator survivors who refused to trust anyone completely, fighters who never stopped preparing for the next battle, apex predators who had learned to hide among prey until the moment came to reveal their true nature. The galaxy thought it knew humanity now. They thought the Kravath War had shown them what humans we